You were sentenced before you were born. No judge, no trial, no appeal. In North Korea's Camp 14, birth itself can be evidence of guilt. Shin Dong-hyuk did not grow up fearing prison. Prison was the only world he ever knew. Sirens replaced mornings. Fences replaced horizons. Hunger replaced childhood. Every day began before sunrise, bodies lining up like inventory under the eyes of guards dogs and prisoners, desperate enough to trade silence for food. This was not punishment for behavior. It was a system optimized for obedience. Camp 14 existed to extract labor, erase identity, and make survival feel earned. There were no release dates because release implies mercy, and mercy slows production. Executions were public lessons. Beatings were routine maintenance. Curiosity was treated like contraband. Children learned early that questions shorten lives. Shin learned faster than most. Survival meant lowering his eyes, flattening his thoughts, and lasting until nightfall. Then, one ordinary morning, while collecting firewood, repeating a task drilled into his body for years, Shin committed the most dangerous act imaginable inside a total system. He compared his life to the possibility of another one. That comparison did not feel like hope. It felt like a sentence. In Camp 14, hell does not arrive with screams or chaos. It arrives on a schedule. Every day begins the same way before sunrise, when a siren cuts through the cold and bodies move before minds catch up. Line up, count, move, work. The routine itself is the violence. By stripping choice down to zero, the system teaches obedience without needing constant force. Hunger does the rest. Food is never enough, never satisfying, never meant to restore strength. It keeps the body alive just long enough to work and keeps the mind trapped in the present, measuring life in minutes instead of futures. A starving person does not plan. He calculates how not to collapse. That is the point. Children learn this logic early. They grow up watching adults shrink, learning that pain is not a crisis, but a condition. Public executions reinforce the lesson. They are not emotional outbursts or acts of rage. They are demonstrations. A body displayed replaces explanation. This is what happens if you steal grain. This is what happens if you speak too freely. This is what happens if you trust the wrong person. Guards do not need to shout. The camp trains prisoners to discipline themselves and each other. Informants listen closely not because they believe, but because hunger turns loyalty into a transaction. Over time, fear loses its edge. Beatings fade into background noise. Death becomes instructional. What makes Camp 14 effective is not brutality alone, but repetition. Violence repeated long enough stops feeling like violence at all. It becomes normal. No one here endures heroically. They are worn down day after day until resistance feels unnatural and survival feels like achievement. Camp 14 was not built to be chaotic. It was engineered. Every workshop, field, and barracks fed a single purpose: extract labor, enforce discipline, and keep the system running without interruption. This was not a prison fueled by rage or cruelty alone. It was an economic machine wrapped in ideology. Prisoners cut timber, mined coal, stitched uniforms, and grew food they would never fully eat. Labor was unpaid, endless, and replaceable. If one body failed, another stepped into the gap. Productivity mattered more than survival. The system did not mourn losses because loss was already calculated into output. What makes Camp 14 terrifying is not the presence of brutal guards, but the absence of necessity for them. Violence was embedded into process. Geography did half the work. Inner zones were crowded and loud, saturated with eyes and schedules. Outer work sites felt quieter, but silence was not freedom. Patrol routes repeated with mechanical precision. Sand near the fence recorded footsteps. Dogs filled the spaces between watchtowers. Every detail existed to restrict thought before it could become action. Control did not rely on constant punishment. It relied on predictability. Predictability teaches compliance. Guards became interchangeable parts, enforcing rules they did not need to believe in. Hunger enforced those rules more efficiently. Informants enforced them best. Escape was not treated as desperation. It was treated as theft. A stolen worker, a disrupted quota, a flaw in a system designed to appear flawless. Camp 14 did not require evil men shouting orders. It required procedures that punished deviation automatically and rewarded silence consistently. That is the shift this story demands. The suffering here is real, but it is not random. It is manufactured. Pain is not the byproduct of failure. It is the outcome of design. To understand Camp 14, you must stop asking who was cruel and start asking how cruelty was made routine, scalable, and efficient. When Park spoke, nothing exploded. There were no promises, no plans, no talk of escape. That was what made it dangerous. Park carried something contraband in Camp 14 memory. He remembered streets with lights, food, with flavor voices that did not whisper out of fear. In a place engineered to erase comparison memory, itself was rebellion. Shin listened while machines rattled and guards passed pretending to learn repairs while absorbing a different measurement of life. Park never offered hope. Hope would have sounded unreal. He offered contrast. Outside people worked and ate and slept without being counted. Outside punishment followed action, not blood. That knowledge lodged and refused to leave. The most dangerous moment in a controlled system is not violence, but comparison. Once you compare, obedience weakens. Once obedience weakens, fear changes shape. Shin tried to dismiss it. He knew the rule, thinking too far ahead gets people killed. But the idea did not demand belief. It only demanded awareness. If there was an outside, then the inside was not fate. It was a condition imposed and maintained. That realization carried weight. It meant responsibility. Staying alive was no longer enough. It meant deciding whether to remain a function or risk becoming a person. They never said the word escape. Naming it would have summoned punishment. Instead, they traded questions disguised as curiosity. Where did the wind cut hardest? When did shadows stretch longest? What happened to men assigned far from the center? Each question sharpened the fracture. This was the inciting rupture of the story. Not a plan, not courage, but awareness. Planning in Camp 14 did not look like planning. It looked like obedience perfected. Shin learned to watch without appearing to watch, to collect information while giving nothing back. Direct attention was dangerous. Indirect notice was survival. He measured guard routes by the ache in his shoulders, counted minutes by the weight of a log, tracked noise by when the dogs went quiet. To be interesting was to be questioned. To be questioned was to be broken. So he practiced becoming dull. He moved predictably, spoke less than required, and let suspicion slide past him toward someone louder, someone weaker. At the firewood station, distance mattered. Fewer buildings meant fewer eyes. Fewer eyes meant fewer mistakes. Patrols looped, paused, looped again. 10 minutes, not a window in illusion. Enough time to work, not enough time to run. Or so everyone believed. Shin kept chopping, letting repetition camouflage the counting that mattered. He did not stare at the fence. He allowed it to exist at the edge of vision, like weather, constant, dangerous, unquestioned. Sand betrayed footsteps. Hard ground swallowed them. Shadows stretched and shrank with the hour. The fence hummed in a way birds avoided. Each detail went nowhere at first, stored without names, without conclusions. The real threat was not the guards. It was hunger with ears. Men listened for plans the way animals listened for food. A rumor could kill faster than a rifle. Shin tested silence as others tested strength. He shrank himself to fit between patrols, between glances, between lives. This was the slow work before action, the tension that never released. Not courage, not speed, but patience sharpened into a blade. Anything faster would expose him. Anything slower would trap him forever. Inspection days arrived without warning because fear works best when it interrupts routine. A whistle boots on concrete, a shouted order, and 50 men snapped upright in a room that smelled of damp cloth and hunger. Hands on heads, eyes down. The rules were simple and absolute. Say nothing. Look nowhere. Expect pain anyway. Shin felt the extra warmth under his clothes like an alarm. Warmth meant hoarding. Hoarding meant intent. Intent meant death. Guards moved slowly, stretching time itself, searching bodies not to find objects, but to remind everyone how little space existed between breathing and becoming an example. They began with the old. They always did. Age signaled weakness, and weakness granted permission. An elderly man was dragged forward, a scrap of hidden food, discovered a lie offered in panic. The response came without anger, only efficiency. A blow, then another, then more, until the count stopped mattering. No one reacted. Reaction was participation. Shin controlled his breath as if it were contraband, steadying his face, emptying his eyes. When the hands reached him, they paused, pressed, slid, lingered. Power enjoyed suspense. Then the word came. Clear. Shin stepped back into line as if nothing had happened, as if the floor had not learned a new shape where the old man lay. The inspection moved on, leaving behind relief that tasted like nausea. Survival had not been earned. It had been postponed. For now, the system remained watching. The fence did not look dramatic. 2 lines of wire posts driven deep into frozen ground, a low hum that felt more imagined than heard. People said it was lethal, and belief did most of the work. When the final patrol passed, Shin and Park moved without signals because signals attract attention. Snow crunched too loudly. Breath burned. Waiting felt heavier than running. Park reached the wire first. For a moment, nothing happened. Then electricity struck sharp and final, and his body locked weight, sagging into the fence. The gap opened because a life closed. Shin did not think. Thinking wastes time. He pressed himself forward, using the only shield available. Current tore through his leg, white and blinding, but momentum carried him through. On the far side, there was no triumph, no relief, no music waiting to rise. Only pain and the certainty that the price had already been paid. Dogs would follow, guards would search the sand, Park would not move again. Shin slid downhill into darkness, blood soaking cloth, breath ragged, alive by seconds. Outside the fence was not freedom. It was exposure. Escape did not mean winning. It meant choosing who would bear the cost when the system demanded payment. The camp remained intact, silent, efficient. One body lost, one body gone. The machine did not pause. Neither did time. No witnesses cheered, no justice arrived, and nothing in the world shifted that night at all. Freedom did not arrive as a door opening. It arrived as distance measured in fragments. Shin moved north through nights stitched together by fear, hitching rides on illegal trucks, hiding in freight cars, eating food. He did not recognize while famine hollowed the countryside. China was not safety. It was delay. Being caught meant being sent back, and back meant erasure. So he learned new rules quickly. Never stay long, never trust kindness, never use your real name. He wore borrowed confidence, borrowed clothes, borrowed silence. Identity became camouflage. Each day required a calculation, each face a risk. Sleep came light and shallow, interrupted by memories that did not ask permission. Freedom did not quiet the camp. It amplified it. The fences followed him inward. Sirens echoed in ordinary noises. Hunger returned without warning, not in the body, but in the mind. After a year of living sideways, chance appeared as people do in dangerous stories, quietly. A journalist listened. An embassy door opened. South Korea arrived without celebration, a place where clocks moved forward and food did not have to be stolen. None of it resolved the damage. Survival had a cost that did not depreciate with distance. Shin had escaped a prison, but not the system it built inside him. This was the cruelest truth of aftermath. Escape removes chains from the body. It does not remove them from memory. Time does not soften, it only buries it. Stories like this refuse to stay in the past because the systems that create them never fully disappear. Camp 14 was not powered only by cruelty or fanaticism. It ran on routine fear and the quiet agreement that some lives could be reduced to output. That is the warning that matters now. A system does not need to look brutal to be brutal. It only needs rules that punish curiosity, reward silence, and make survival feel like a privilege instead of a right. Shin's story is not a demand for guilt or outrage. It is a reminder of how easily freedom erodes when attention fades. Freedom is rarely taken all at once. It is traded away in small concessions, normalized step by step, until obedience feels reasonable and resistance feels irresponsible. Silence becomes fuel, comfort becomes camouflage. By the time consequences appear, the structure feels permanent. Shin survived because he noticed repetition and questioned it, and he paid a price most people will never be asked to pay. His escape does not end with victory music because real freedom has no finish line. It requires vigilance memory and the willingness to stay uncomfortable. The responsibility does not belong to one country or one era. It belongs to anyone living inside a system powerful enough to make injustice feel ordinary today.